Well, hello and welcome to the Movie Paradise. I am your host, Nathanael Molnár, and this is Movie Night Tonight. Every week we talk about a new film in depth and do a spoiler discussion, with each month having a new theme. The month we are currently in is December, which is holiday movies, and the film we are talking about today is 1990's Home Alone. I am your host, Nathanael Molnár. I'm joined by a great panel today. With me, I have Julia Spots.
Hello!
And Matt Smith.
Hello.
So, let's start this show by going around real quick and saying our first impressions of the film and roughly how many times we've seen it, starting with Julia.
So, I think you were born seeing this movie. I don't remember first seeing this movie. I think it's the same thing as Colt 45. Everyone's born knowing the lyrics. Everyone's born seeing Home Alone, so I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, but it's probably a lot. Mm-hmm. I also like this movie, and I said last night that I think it lacks inconsistency, which is my biggest thing, and I criticize it every time we watch a movie.
Matt, first impressions?
Honestly, same. I feel like I've always known this movie. It's just part of culture.
If I have not mentioned it, I don't know if I did, but this is a spoiler discussion, so if you have not watched Home Alone, watch it first and then come back to this discuson.
Spoiler, Joe Pesci's in it.
Oh, no.
You just did the Home Alone face!
A little bit, yep. I don't know the amount of times I've seen this movie. Probably, I'd say maybe 3-4 times, something like that. Mild numbers compared to some of the other ones. Yeah, rookie numbers.
Yeah.
I really like this movie a lot. I've always, remembered it fondly in my head. Oh yeah, Home Alone. I like Home Alone. Watching it again was interesting because I have not seen it in many, many years. And so I didn't really know if it was one of those movies that you like as a kid and then you grow up and you watch it and it doesn't exactly hold up. But I thought it held up pretty well.
I think so, too. I got a giggle out of a couple parts.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed myself watching Home Alone.
All I'm saying is that there's not a movie with John Candy in it that doesn't hold up.
Yeah, he is immediately the one who makes everything hold up.
Yeah, and he even had, a small cameo in this, and I saw him and I was like, that's John Candy. Yep. That's our boy.
Pretty much, I think 90% of his lines were all improvised.
Perfect. I mean, listen, all I'm saying is that I'd probably put my life on the line for Uncle Buck. And that carries over to Home Alone.
Yep. So, on that note, let's get right into our discussion of Home Alone. And we should start, I think, maybe, with Macaulay Culkin, who, interesting place to start this discussion with.
Very, honestly. You really got me with a curveball there.
So, a sentiment that I always have with child actors is that I think, more often than not, child actors do not give good performances. Having a child actor in your film can sometimes be to the detriment of the film. That's nothing against children.
No, this is an anti-children discussion.
It's just that some kids aren't the greatest actors, and when you have them on screen, sometimes they don't give great performances. And so when you have a film that the entire story and fabric of the film is surrounded around one performance from a child, that you run the risk of sinking the entire movie if that performance doesn't work. Because if you watch this movie and you go, dear God, get this kid off screen, Home Alone doesn't work as a film. So I think you can't understate how good Macaulay Culkin is. Now, there are parts of this movie where I'm watching and he will say a line and I'll be like, okay, Macaulay, that's not the best delivery.
Okay, Macaulay.
But he's 8. He's 8 years old when he was filming this. I think while you can watch this movie and while there are definitely parts of it where his performance isn't the greatest, he'll say some lines that maybe not the greatest delivery of those lines. I think the fact that he is the center and heart of this movie and that the reason this movie works as well as it does is because of how well he does and Chris Columbus's direction of Macaulay Culkin in order to get that performance to make it work. So does anyone share my sentiment that they think Macaulay Culkin did a really good job, or would you disagree with me?
I agree. Absolutely. I think for a child actor, he really did it well. I will put on a side note that as you were talking, my little monkey ADD brain couldn't stop thinking of one, Macaulay Culkin, and just because that would be a funny name, and two,
I was wondering if I got the name wrong. I started looking at my notes.
No, just Macaulay Culkin. I thought it would be funny, and two, Chris Columbus's parents really sat there, looked at the birth certificate, and said, "Okay, name him Christopher Columbus." Anyway, I do agree. I share your sentiment, and I think Macaulay Culkin, he did really well, and I'm really sad that he didn't go further in his life with movies, but he is coming back. So.
He is, of course, I think we all know he's had his troubles in his later years, but he is, I think he's cleaned himself up, and he's trying to get, I don't know, I don't know too much. I don't follow him too much.
Sorry, you're not a Macaulay Culkin fan.
No, I don't actively follow Macaulay Culkin, but so I don't know if he's trying to get back into acting or if he's moving away from acting and he's just doing his own thing, trying to better himself. I don't know exactly what's going on with him.
He seems to be doing a YouTube show.
Good for him.
I'm happy for him. He has long hair now, and it looks very good. He looks like the singer of some type of Foo Fighters-esque rock band. So I like him, yeah.
Well, I mean, good for him.
I'm happy
for
that
him
he's doing well.
To go through what he went through, and now he's on the other side of it, and he's trying to make a name for himself. Good for him.
I'm glad this guy's getting his life together.
Yeah, that's always a good thing to hear. It's always good to hear a redemption story.
Absolutely.
Matt, what are your impressions of Macaulay Culkin as an actor in this film and his performance?
I mean, especially when you have like actors that have like 10 years of acting experience and he doesn't even have like 10 years of life experience. Like, I think,
he's not even level 10 yet, dude.
And then you mix that with like the whimsical nature of just the film in general. Like, the fact that I think I can look past like, you know, the stuff that maybe is not so good, but like he's just good. Yeah. He's just he seems like a kid that's not trying to be like an actor.
Yeah. He's charming in this movie.
He's charming.
He's a very charming kid, and
charismatic. If
exactly.
You will.
And I think that adds a lot of his charm as a performer in this film. Adds a lot to the charm of the film itself.
My issue with child actors, as I had raised last night, is that I haven't seen a child in, I think, 2 months now. I just haven't been around them for whatever reason. They're never at family events. Everyone's grown in my family. So I haven't seen any children. And as watching this movie, I realized that children are shaped really weird. Like, they're disproportionate. And they don't look like adults, obviously, because they're children.
Their heads are too small.
They're too big.
Or they're too big.
They're way too big.
Or their body's too small.
Yeah, their body's too small, head's too big. They have, like, weird arm shapes. I don't like kids. I don't, like, mind them. I used to take care of kids. Mm-hmm. I don't know why anyone hired me to take care of kids, but I used to take care of kids. And I just hate the way kids look. I think they're weird. But aside from that, I think he was good.
Aside from your built-in child prejudice.
I don't like the way they look. Okay. Oh, my God.
For you to be able to say Macaulay Culkin did a good job, you liked him in this movie, and for you to be completely biased against children from the beginning shows how good of a job he actually did.
Exactly. He charmed me enough to not hate him.
Yeah. Essentially. So, moving on to the next part, continuing with the theme of performances, I want to talk a little bit about the Wet Bandits. Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern.
Joe Pesci.
Let's talk about Joe Pesci.
I tweet about Joe Pesci at least once a month. I think it's really funny, first of all, with Joe Pesci, that this man has been in Home Alone, but also like the serious, very good movie Goodfellas. Mm-hmm. And I am a stan of both these movies. Mm-hmm. More so, same character. More so Goodfellas.
So, I want to, talking about Goodfellas, I think this is interesting because I think in today's context, in 2018, we can watch Home Alone and we can think to ourselves, oh, this is a parody of his character in Goodfellas. Mm-hmm. When looking at the facts, Goodfellas came out 2 months before Home Alone came out. So Goodfellas had not been out and hadn't become like a classic or anything like that.
Joe Pesci's a one-trick pony.
Essentially. But I think
Wow. We cracked the code here, boys.
Yep. I think it's funny because I think we're all guilty of looking at his character in Home Alone and thinking that he's doing that they purposely are like, okay, we want the guy from Goodfellas to come in and do what he did in Goodfellas, but for a family-friendly Christmas comedy. But that's not necessarily the case. Now, Joe Pesci had been in other movies. He had built up notoriety and had come and become a typecast character and character actor. But I think when we all look at Joe Pesci in Home Alone, we always think, oh, he's doing his Goodfellas character, but in Home Alone. But, I mean, Goodfellas had only been out for 2 months. There's no way for that to become the classic that it is. Home Alone was filmed, written way before Goodfellas ever came out.
I think the reason that we think that is because he's so aggressively Italian. And I don't I have an uncle, and he is also aggressively Italian. And he's a one-trick pony, too, so maybe it's in the blood.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, I'm a one-trick pony, that's for sure. And it's definitely in the blood.
Yeah. I mean, Joe Pesci is a brilliant actor.
Yeah, but I think it might be that he just has the shtick where he's aggressively Italian, and so everybody associates each character that he's Italian in as being the same guy.
Yeah, essentially,
as being Joe Pesci.
And I think it was deliberate in getting someone of Joe Pesci's caliber in for this film. I was reading a couple.
Sorry, can you imagine Home Alone but with Al Pacino in it?
Well. Interesting you bring that up. And I was reading up on some of the people they were looking at other than Joe Pesci. Not Al Pacino, but they were looking at Robert De Niro was one person, and they were looking at Danny DeVito.
Oh! They really dropped the ball on that one, honestly, guys. Is Danny DeVito Italian? I guess DeVito was an Italian name.
I would assume so.
He's not aggressively Italian, such as...
Not to the same extent Joe Pesci is.
Yeah, he's not a Joe Pesci man. He's more of a raspy voiced Philadelphian, if you will. Cameo.
So on the note of the Wet Bandits, you have Joe Pesci, you have Daniel Stern, and this was something that I really took away when we were watching the film yesterday. The performances that these two give, especially when we get into the latter half of the film, and it is Kevin McAllister against the Wet Bandits in the house, they go for very, very over-the-top performances. And they go for these sort of Charlie Chaplin-esque, slapstick physical comedy. And it's interesting because I feel like you run the risk when you have performances like that. You run the risk of it really feeling out of place and going against the tone. But I felt like they fit in with the tone of the film. The film isn't necessarily, the tone of it isn't necessarily over the top in the same way that the performances are. There isn't a ton of like slapstick comedy in the movie up until you get to the latter half of the film.
Yeah.
So the tone of the movie doesn't necessarily match the performances that Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern give, but their performances and the physical comedy element, how over the top it is, that all fits within the tone that Chris Columbus has crafted with this movie. And so I'm curious to hear your opinions as to whether or not you felt like the performances that they gave and the over-the-topness of it, whether that fits in with what the movie established tonally, or if it kind of feels a bit jarring when you watch the movie. Does it stand out? Yeah.
So before I get into my feelings about this, I'd like to just say Simon and Garfunkel slapstick comedy collab. That's exactly what this movie is, because Joe Pesci and what's his name?
Daniel Stern.
Daniel Stern. That's Simon and Garfunkel. But aside from that, I think it fits because I think you don't have a lot of this. You have funny moments, but this kind of makes it appeal to everyone. You've got a little bit of each humor sprinkled within this, if you will. And I don't dislike it. Slapstick comedy isn't personally for me, because I have an issue with inconsistencies and it's filled with them. But I think for the movie itself, it was good.
Yeah.
And I think it fit correctly.
Yes.
I think it just appealed. It had an appeal to everyone. It makes it both an adult's movie with some of the more complex humor. Yeah. Home Alone complex humor. Or you have just the straight up in your face, haha, he put his foot on a nail, which made me gasp, by the way.
It was harder to watch now than it was. As a kid, I was probably laughing.
Yeah, you're like, he's going to step on a nail. And now it's like, there's tar on your foot and you're about to step on a nail. You need to go to the hospital.
I've seen A Quiet Place. I look at someone stepping on a nail completely differently now.
I, don't even want to think about it. I'm like, ugh.
I actually really hate, I'm totally fine with, swords or whatever, but, something about, sharp things are, slowly...
Yeah.
Listen, I've stepped on earrings before, so it's gone into my heel. I can't even imagine a nail going through your foot.
I hate it, and the earliest instance of that, cringe that I get whenever I see it is Home Alone.
Yeah.
I think I accredit this movie to my, long-running fear of just, slowly moving.
Well, see, I think the psychology of this, I think, is interesting. I think the reason why... most people, when they watch a movie and someone gets cut with glass or something like that, that bothers them more than someone getting impaled by a sword or being torn apart by bullets. I think it's because, 99% of us are never going to experience anything like being impaled by a sword or being torn apart by bullets. But you can, realistically, step on a nail. You can be cut by glass, and so that stuff gives us more of a more visceral reaction out of us because we can imagine it more. It's more within the realm of reality for us than someone being impaled by a sword.
I think a big thing with that, as Matt, he deliberately said slow, which I agree with. As a person that has been poked and prodded with many a needle, by choice. For my own cosmetic looks, I can personally say that, it's always fast. It's always a fast needle through and then you're done.
Yeah.
And that's because someone's not going to want to get a piercing if it's a slow, okay, we're going to take 3 seconds to put a needle through your nose. And that makes me think, I think it might be the slow aspect that really gets people. Because if you saw someone get cut with glass quick, you'd be like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Here, you see someone go right down really deep and slow, you're like, ah! And that, I think it has to do with the speed.
Well, I just always find that fascinating that that something on a smaller scale bothers us psychologically more than something on a larger scale, and I think it's just a relatability issue.
I think another thing is that a sword through your body is going to kill you. Bullets in your body is going to kill you. You don't have to worry about that. You're just going to be dead. Just a really sharp cut. You've got to keep up with that. It's like getting a dog for a week because you have to take care of yourself more. Yeah. Not for me.
And I like how you brought up A Quiet Place, because when we saw A Quiet Place and I saw the nail on the stair, the first thing I thought of was Home Alone.
I'd completely forgotten about the nail.
Maybe Home Alone has completely changed our culture just with that nail.
It probably has. So I think one of the really special parts about this movie is the character of Mr. Marley, or Old Man Marley, the old man throughout the film. And what I think really works for this character and his inclusion in the film is that it brings extra dimension to the movie. I think it would have been very easy to just have the film be completely centered around Kevin McAllister and everything going on there, and it would have been kind of, on an emotional level, one note. You just have Kevin's home alone. He has his whole fun phase where it's like, oh, yay, everyone's gone, woo, and all this fun stuff. And then you have the stuff with the wet bandits, and all is neatly wrapped in a bow by the end of the film, and off you go. But with the inclusion of Mr. Marley, you have this, his character's character arc and the story arc surrounding Mr. Marley. I think it really accents Kevin's character arc. It mirrors it and it accents it in a very interesting way. Because the whole film, Kevin is dealing with this whole, and this is another part we'll get into in a little bit later in the discussion, but Kevin's dealing with this whole thing of, I don't like my family. Nobody pays attention to me. I don't like anyone. I want everyone to disappear. And then everyone does disappear. And he has fun with this, and then his character arc is realizing how much he actually does care about his family by the end of the movie. And so to have someone like Mr. Marley, who on a very tragic level understands what it's like to, when you want to be connected to your family, to not be connected to your family. And I think those are two different character arcs that accent themselves very well. And Kevin can learn a lot from Marley, but I think in another sense, what makes this so perfectly positioned in the story is that Marley learns from Kevin. And it takes just the bluntness of a kid who can just look at a situation and just call it what it is to make Mr. Marley realize what he needs to do. Yeah. And it's just because if you think of it, like, think of what the movie would look like if it was all from Old Man Marley's position. He has the falling out with his son, doesn't talk to his son for years. He's agonizing in his head, going back and forth. Does he want to talk to me? Does he not want to talk to me? This, and this. And then all he does is just hear from a kid saying, why don't you just call him?
Yeah.
And it takes the bluntness of a kid to snap Marley out of it and then take the step that he needed to take to conquer this fear that he had.
Yeah.
So I think the reason why the inclusion of this character works so well for the film, emotionally, to add extra dimension to it, is the character arcs accent themselves very well, and that Kevin learns from Marley, but Marley also learns from Kevin. And I think it's a small part of the story, and it's a subplot, and it could have been cut out, but I think it adds a lot to the movie, and it makes it more emotionally rich with its inclusion.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I really like when, I don't care what movie it is, I like when it establishes an emotional connection to characters. And I think this really establishes that. You think Kevin's funny and everything, but then you see more of an inside point of him talking to Mr. Marley.
Yeah.
Another point that I have raised when we watched A Wonderful Life is that I have a really bad emotional connection, and I get very, very teary-eyed when I see people getting harassed or having people being mean to them when they've done nothing wrong. It's A Wonderful Life with the beggar. And this, when kids are mean to Mr. Marley, I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about it now. I don't like it. I get upset. I get... I don't want to think about it. It's so sad. And he's just a hurt man that wants to reconnect with his son, and he's not getting that.
Yeah.
And I'm going through too much emotionally to even try and handle the Mr. Marley thing. Yeah. I do like the way they parallel their situations because it makes me think of Mr. Marley as his younger self, as Kevin, and Kevin as his older self as Mr. Marley.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very cool scene. I like the church scene.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good scene.
I just think it all is... It's tied up nicely with a bow.
Yeah.
In a very somber way.
Yeah. And especially when we get to the end of the film and we've had this whole... I don't even know how long, like maybe 20 minutes of all this goofy, over-the-top physical comedy. So, and then to have that kind of cathartic, emotional moment at the very end where we see, from Kevin's perspective, which is a good decision on how to shoot the scene.
That was a very good decision, yeah.
From Kevin's perspective, seeing Marley reunite with his family, and then just he's hugging his granddaughter and just gives the wave to Kevin.
To be honest, I wish it was his son that he was hugging, not his
I was thinking about that when we were watching it. I think his
granddaughter, although I understand why they did it, he still had a small connection with her.
Yeah.
I think it would have been better if it were his son. Just the reuniting of that would probably be better, but you know what? Nobody's perfect.
Well, I wonder if maybe there was an attempt because when looking at Kevin's character, you don't have a connection between him and his father in this movie at all.
Not a single bit.
The connection that he has is with his mother. So I wonder if they were trying to do some sort of... Their parallel was Kevin with his mom, and then Marley with his granddaughter.
Yeah, it very well could be that.
So that would be my my answer to that. But I agree. I think when I was watching, I was like, this might have been even more powerful if he was hugging his son at this point.
Yeah.
An age thing, because in the church scene, he has the whole where he's like, you know her, like you're roughly the same age. They might have been trying to go for
a parallel
That's
with
very
the
fair,
age. I think that could also work with it, definitely. Matt, what are your thoughts on the inclusion of the Marley character?
No, I love it. The church scene is just probably one of my favorite scenes. Like what I remember the most is just them talking, and I feel like going back to the child performer thing, he just seemed like how a child would talk to a man he doesn't really know. Like at first he's like just like genuinely just like scared because he knows all of the rumors that the mean kids have been saying around, and then when he warms up to him in a very like logical way. So it's just very natural, and then the setting is just great.
Like I said before, this is a character and a subplot that very easily, when they're editing this movie, could have gone, this isn't that important to the movie. We can just cut all that out. But it is important. It's not, I don't think narratively it's important, but I think on an emotional level and for fleshing out the characters and adding dimension to the actual film, it is very important. And it's fundamental, and it helps take this movie from being just a one-note, goofy family comedy to being something that has a little bit more heart to it.
We only need one note in this film.
Yeah.
And that's Joe Pesci.
Joe Pesci's so good in this.
Also,
so good.
I think it's interesting how like when you first see this movie when you're a kid, you really either don't totally understand what's going on, or it's like you don't remember it because you just remember the fun stuff, the stuff that's meant for the kids. But then you can watch it again like years later when you're older, and you realize there's this whole other part to the movie you never actually realized until you're older and you understand these things. You understand the feelings that they might be going through.
I love how what we regard as the fun part for kids in this movie is sadistic torture.
It's hilarious to me. We're sitting there and we're like, he just got a paint bucket to the face, and this man just got a paint bucket to the face.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways I have from watching it again, being significantly older at this point in my life, watching it now than when I did when I was a kid, is that it was funny as a kid to because I think it was kind of an animation level of slapstick physical comedy brought to live action, because if you watch like Tom and Jerry or anything like that, it's all about characters being brutally beaten by things.
Oh yeah.
But it's animation, so nobody gets hurt. It's all fun. You can have Jerry or Tom is the cat, right? Jerry's the cat.
No, Tom is the cat, Jerry's the mouse.
Okay, I haven't watched him.
Sorry, you're not a true Tom and Jerry stan, but
Tom
worry, I'm
can be completely crushed into it like a cube, and he'd be a literal cube. Nothing happens. So I think they're trying to take that kind of physical comedy that's brutal from animation and bring it into a live action form. And so I think as kids will see that kind of connection, and so they'll watch Home Alone and they'll just find it funny.
This is 90s. The movie was released in like 1990, right?
Yeah, 1990.
Yeah, that's totally just Sunday morning cartoons.
Exactly.
Yep.
Every kid would be totally like would know what's going on. It fits so perfectly.
A part that really got me was when he got the iron to the head. That would kill someone. That you would have been dead. That would crack your skull.
Yeah.
He just got up and had a mark. Was like,
yeah, he's like, oh, little dizzy. No, you would be deceased. You would be gone for the rest of your days, which had ended that moment, because that iron was like 10 feet up. And that was the 90s. Things were still made pretty well back then.
Yeah.
That is going to kill you.
Yeah.
I hated that. There were a few parts where they should have been dead.
Yeah.
And then Kevin McAllister gets a manslaughter charge or some type of charge and is tried as an adult. And that's all I'm saying. This movie should have ended very differently.
No, but exactly. That goes back to what I was just saying. of that watching it now, I look at it very differently.
Yeah.
I don't when I was when I was a kid, I can watch this movie and see the whole and just look at it as if it's a Saturday morning cartoon. But watching it now, we feel everything, like when he gets hit in the face with the iron or any of the times that they slip and fall on their back. I'm thinking like, that's got to kill your
Joe
back.
Pesci would have broken his neck. Did you see the one where he flips all the way? He makes a full 360. Yeah. That man would be dead.
Yeah.
And that's KO. Both of them are dead now. You've got the iron, you've got the 360. Those guys are gone. Yep. Kevin McAllister has no worries anymore except his future criminal record.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still a kid because I still loved it.
I enjoyed it too.
I still have my childlike glow.
But I think we look at it in a different lens at this point in our lives watching it.
We're seeing people get, absolutely obliterated.
We're more realistic as we grow older, I think is what it is. We look at things critically.
Yeah. So one of the things that this film operates and can operate, at least in my opinion, on being sort of a cautionary tale. Where it's one of those movies that is like, oh, be careful what you wish for. And that's how I kind of see Home Alone as. He's like, I wish my family would just disappear. And granted, there's a more complex narrative reason for why the family disappears rather than just magic. But he says, I wish my family would disappear. The family disappears. And then he has his arc of, yay, the family's gone. I can enjoy myself. And then by the end of the film, I wish my family was back. He gets the family back. And so this movie can operate as kind of a cautionary tale of careful what you wish for and all that. So I posed a question now. Would you say that these messages and themes in the film, through it being kind of a cautionary tale, would you say that it's too overt? Because I think there are points in the movie where, like, quite literally, he says, I want my family to disappear. The family does then disappear. So there are points where it is very on the nose. Would you say that that kind of works with the tone that the film is going for, especially having things that are so overt in the beginning, themes and messages, and then, of course, throughout the rest of the film, you have all this over-the-top slapstick comedy? Does that kind of all fit in with this tone that's been crafted that's a little bit outside of the realm of reality, not necessarily like this grounded, gritty movie? Would you say that it works with it, or are they too overt and they too stand out, could have been more subtle?
I think this was put together kind of like a puzzle. You've got all these pieces that end up together at the end, fitting together. And I think, they could have been more subtle. And, he said, I wish my family weren't around. And then, next morning they're not around.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's a kid's movie.
Yeah.
Kids aren't going to pick up on subtlety. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to take into account that this is a family movie. Kids are going to be watching it. If this were made for adults, which Christmas movies generally are not, it would have been very good with subtlety, and it probably would have added a more dramatic tone. But Endgame, you needed that lack of subtlety to make it a family movie, I think. I think you needed to make a point to say, hey, he said this, now this happened. Big with, was it Tom Hanks or Bill Murray?
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. I always get them mixed up for whatever reason. They're totally different people. But Tom Hanks in Big, same thing.
Yeah.
I wish I was big. He's big.
Yeah.
I think for family movies, you need that lack of subtlety so both the parents and the kids can enjoy the movie.
See, I agree with you to an extent. I don't think I necessarily agree that a family movie or a kid's movie can't have subtlety, because I think just look at Pixar. The Pixar movies, there is a great deal of subtlety and nuance to those films, and I think that's because the philosophy of those movies are, we are making movies that are accessible to kids, but these movies are not for kids.
Yeah.
And because there is a distinction.
That's very fair. You look at old cartoons, or I guess any cartoon, and they'll slip adult jokes. And I was watching today. I've really been into Family Guy and Simpsons compilations on YouTube. And today I watched jokes I didn't get as a kid on The Simpsons. Like part 30. And hot take, it was hilarious. And I think having a mixture of subtlety and just in your face. This is what we're saying. I think that's what makes for the best type of kids movie, because you can enjoy it as you grow up.
Yeah. And I think so. I completely 100% think that a kids movie or a movie that is accessible for kids can have subtlety. But I think in what they were going for with Home Alone was, like you were saying, I don't think they were going for that. I think they were going for something that is a bit outside of the realm of reality. Mm-hmm. I think it's not a fantastical film to the same extent as It's a Wonderful Life, but it does operate outside of that realm of reality. There are a little bit of fantastical elements to this, like the cautionary tale, I wish my parents would disappear, they do disappear, like the fact that you can have all this slapstick comedy, nobody gets really hurt. Yeah. Someone steps on glass with their feet gets set and on no fire. Blood. Yeah. So you have these things happen that aren't exactly within the lines of what would really happen. Yeah. And I think that's just the movie that they were going for. Matt, do you have anything to say for this?
Similar to what I said about, like, how when I was a kid I really didn't, like, maybe pick up on the Murray, same right? The older man?
Oh, Marley.
Marley, yeah. Yeah, Marley.
Similar to, like, I didn't pick up on that as a kid. I see, like, it's the part of the movie that the kids are paying attention to, or the kids remember most. So those themes are, very clearly stated. And I think it fits with how, like, there's the difference between the two and, like, what age group is gonna, go with each. Yeah, I feel like there's, like, the two arcs to this movie, and then, like, who you are is what you're paying attention to. Yeah. And I feel like it fits with the kids' side.
Yeah.
What the kids are doing.
I think I might just think kids are stupid. That's what this has taught me, is that I hate the way they look. I think they're kind of stupid. But I also like that kids are blunt. Mm-hmm. When I worked with kids, if they called me stupid, I was like, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I yelled at them because I was like, you can't call people stupid. I would tell them, like, hey, be nice, but they're probably right.
So I'd say the last point I'd like to raise here is this is kind of touching on the discussion we had last week with It's a Wonderful Life. So last week when we were discussing It's a Wonderful Life, we had the discussion and we kind of came to the consensus that It's a Wonderful Life is a Christmas classic. Everyone holds it to be a classic Christmas movie, but it is not within its DNA a Christmas movie. So quite simply, I'd say the question is Home Alone in its DNA a holiday Christmas movie? And if it is, what makes it different from It's a Wonderful Life?
I have to say, I was going to say that no, it's not, but yes, it is. Mm-hmm. Because the whole basis, she comes home on Christmas, and she's always saying, I can't leave my child alone on Christmas, and all that. We're going to Paris for Christmas. Yeah. There's too many themes of Christmas to say it's not. And at first I was like, at first glance I was like, well, it's just set during Christmas time. Mm-hmm. But even everything around is decorated in Christmas. Yeah. In It's a Wonderful Life, it's just snowing and around Christmas. And I think that's because it wasn't as commercialized in the 50s, and it all made, like, it fit in the 40s, I guess it would be. It wasn't as commercialized back then. But even though that's all, fun and games, whatever, I don't... there are way too many just straight, it's Christmas time, it's the day before Christmas, it's Christmas Eve. There's too many cameos of Christmas for it to not be a Christmas movie. You can watch it in another time and enjoy it.
I think what makes, I don't know, I feel like the church scene, again, is what makes it a Christmas movie, because I feel like that's very, at that point, if it's not Christmas, then that scene doesn't really, I feel like you lose a lot. And as, like, someone that was, dragged to, church services when I was a kid all the time, I very much know, I remember that atmosphere of, like, the church, of a church, like, on Christmas, and it's like...
Yeah.
So I feel like if you take Christmas out of it, or if you, like, try to change, what it's about, I feel like you lose a lot, and then you'd have to replace it with something that just wouldn't fit as well.
Exactly. I think the quick test you can do to check to see if your movie is a holiday or a Christmas movie is, does it operate just as well if it's not Christmas? But yes, I think with It's a Wonderful Life, you can take Christmas out and you can just make it sometime in December and it works completely fine. You might lose a little bit, but not nearly as much as Home Alone. So as we bring this show to a close, I'd like to just go around quickly and say what our final thoughts on 1990s Home Alone is, starting with Julia.
I love Home Alone, and I'm probably going to go home and cry over the Mr. Marley scene because, not the church scene, I'm not going to cry over that. I'm going to cry because Buzz was mean to him. And old people don't deserve anything bad. I love old people. They like bread pudding like I do. They like tapioca pudding like I do. We get along, and they can tell me cool stories. So, end game for my movie night tonight. Stop being mean to old people, please. It's going to start making me cry.
You just saved me from having to do the PSA.
Yeah.
Matt, final thoughts on Home Alone?
Similar to It's a Wonderful Life, it's just a movie that I've known my entire life. So I feel like I don't really have an opinion on it other than it exists. But also there's like 3 of these movies, right?
4?
I've only watched the first one. I'm not a connoisseur.
I love seeing the end of this movie and then just kind of remembering, but they do this like 3 more times.
The parents are stupid.
You know how you can be a wine expert like a somm?
Mm-hmm.
I think Matt's like that, but with Home Alone movies. He's a somm of Home Alone.
So my final thoughts on Home Alone is that, like I was saying at the beginning of this show, I didn't know exactly if this was going to hold up, if this was a movie that, while I enjoyed it as a kid, if I was still going to be able to enjoy it now as an adult. But I can definitely say that Home Alone, while it is a family film, while there is a lot in here for kids to enjoy, it is still a movie that I think as you grow older, you can still watch and enjoy on its own. And I think it is because there's more in this movie than just pleasing kids and just stuff for kids. While it does have the physical comedy, much in the same vein as Saturday morning cartoons, as Matt pointed out, while it does have that in there, there is more subtlety and there is more emotion to it, especially when we start talking about the Marley character. And I think it's a lot of those elements and those decisions that John Hughes made when he wrote the script, when Chris Columbus made when he was directing this film. A lot of these decisions to make it more than just a one-note, one-dimension film. I think that is part of the reason why it still holds up, why we consider it a classic, and why us as adults can watch it still today.
I did not know this was made by John Hughes. Today,
I
found out yesterday. That's crazy to me because not to be dramatic, but I have cried at least 4 times in my life to Pretty in Pink. Is that a John Hughes movie?
I don't know, to be honest.
It might be. I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing him up with someone else. But if I'm not, Pretty in Pink, love Molly Ringwald. That's a big thing.
So our semester is coming to a close, and this is the final show of the semester. But fear not, movie night tonight will be continuing. It will have different people on board, and we'll be watching different films and having different kinds of discussion, but it'll still be movie night tonight, so don't worry, that's still going to be coming out every Saturday. But I just wanted to say that I have loved being able to do this show this past semester. I've loved that people have gotten excited and that people have gotten passionate about it as well and have joined in. And so I just wanted to thank all the people who have been involved in the show and have helped out
Are you going to the group chat?
So I just wanted to thank all the guests who have been on the show for this whole semester. Connor Murphy, Nick Polidor, Matt Smith, Crystal Gonzalez, Dave Scrivani, Nick Gerard, Julia Spots, Ian Brower, Johnny Gifford, everyone who's helped make this show possible. Thank you for being involved. I've loved doing movie night tonight. I'm so excited to get to do another great semester next year.
Movie night TNT Gen 2.
Yes,
it's coming.
Gen 2 is coming. Next semester, we are going to have some great films, some great discussions. I'm very much looking forward to that. But this is not the end. Even though it sounds like this is the final closing episode of Movie Night Tonight, we still have a couple more left in Season 1. So Movie Night Tonight will be continuing. It is not going away. So while this is the final episode of the semester, we will be
we shall
returning.
Prevail.
So that has been our discussion of 1990s Home Alone. Once again, I am your host, Nathanael Molnár. I would like to thank my panel for being here. Julie Spots, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Matt Smith, thanks for being here.
It's always a pleasure.
So the movie we are going to be talking about next week is the Christmas comedy The Night Before with Seth Rogen, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Anthony Mackie. I'm not
going to be on that.
Well, now you get to experience it.
I've been in love with Seth Rogen since I was like 9, dude.
I love Seth Rogen.
He's the perfect man.
And this is a great film. It's an atypical Christmas film to talk about when talking about holiday movies, but we're going to be having that discussion next week. So watch the movie and then tune in next Saturday. Check out our discussion of The Night Before. So thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more content. Be sure to follow us on all of our various social medias at Movie Night TNT. That's Movie Night TNT. And all episodes are updated and uploaded online on Saturdays. They're available on YouTube. They're available on Spotify. They're available on iTunes. You can check out all previous episodes and all upcoming episodes on those links. You can search them or you can find them by going at Movie Night TNT. All links are available there. So for everyone listening, and until we talk about The Night Before next week, thanks for joining us.